The Forbidden Zone. On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. The blast sent a plume of radioactive material 2 kilometers into the atmosphere. Within hours, the surrounding area became the most contaminated place on Earth. 48 hours later, the Soviet government evacuated 49,000 people from the nearby city of Pripyat. They were told it was temporary. None of them ever returned. Today, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone spans 2,600 square kilometers of abandoned land. The reactor itself remains encased in a massive steel sarcophagus, but beneath it, the core continues to decay. Radiation levels inside certain areas exceed 300 sieverts per hour. For context, a single sievert is enough to cause radiation sickness. 5 sieverts will kill you. At 300, your body begins to shut down within seconds. Deep in the basement of reactor number 4 lies something far worse. In December 1986, a cleanup crew descended into the wreckage and discovered a formation unlike anything seen before. It resembled hardened lava, black and wrinkled, spreading across the floor in frozen waves. They called it the elephant's foot. It was not lava, it was corium, a nightmarish mixture of nuclear fuel, melted concrete, sand, and steel, formed when the reactor core melted through multiple floors during the disaster. The elephant's foot emits approximately 10,000 roentgens per hour. Standing within 1 meter of it for 5 minutes delivers a lethal dose. Death occurs within 2 weeks. The first photograph of the formation was taken by a remote camera. The radiation was so intense it warped the film, leaving streaks and distortions across the image. The photographer, who later approached it to take a second shot, collapsed shortly after. He died from acute radiation syndrome 30 days later. Acute radiation syndrome, or ARS, is not a gradual illness. It begins within hours of exposure. The first symptoms are nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Within days, the bone marrow shuts down, and the body loses its ability to produce blood cells. Internal bleeding follows. The skin blisters and peels. Organs fail in sequence. There is no reversal. Treatment only prolongs the inevitable. Radiation does not announce itself. You cannot see it, smell it, or feel it until it is far too late. The exclusion zone remains under military guard. Entry is restricted, but the contamination does not respect boundaries. Rain carries particles into nearby rivers. Wind spreads them across fields. Dust from the ruins settles into soil that will remain toxic for thousands of years. In 2016, engineers completed a new containment structure over reactor number 4, designed to last a century. But the elephant's foot remains untouched. Too dangerous to approach, too lethal to remove. It will continue decaying for another 100,000 years. And anyone who enters that basement without protection will not leave it alive. Snake Island. Approximately 90 miles off the coast of São Paulo, Brazil, there exists a 110-acre island that no human is permitted to visit. Ilha da Queimada Grande, known locally as Snake Island, is home to one of the most concentrated populations of venomous serpents on the planet. The Brazilian Navy has declared it a restricted zone. Entry requires explicit government authorization, granted only to certified researchers under strict supervision. Violations result in immediate prosecution. There is no tourism. There are no tours. There is only isolation. The island is dominated by a single species, Bothrops insularis, the golden lancehead viper. This snake exists nowhere else on Earth. It evolved in complete isolation after rising sea levels separated the island from the mainland roughly 11,000 years ago. Without ground-based prey, the species adapted to hunt birds. Its venom became significantly more potent than its mainland relatives, capable of killing within hours. Population density surveys conducted in the early 2000s estimated between 1 and 5 snakes per square meter in certain areas of the island. In the densest zones, researchers reported being unable to walk more than 3 meters without encountering a viper. The snakes inhabit the trees, the underbrush, the rocky outcrops, and the forest floor. There is no safe path, Every surface is occupied. The venom of Bothrops insularis is a hemotoxin. It destroys blood vessels, causes massive internal bleeding, and triggers acute kidney failure. Symptoms begin within minutes: swelling, intense pain, nausea, and vomiting. Without antivenin, tissue around the bite site begins to necrotize. The skin blackens and peels away. Blood pressure drops rapidly. Victims experience hemorrhaging from the eyes, gums, and internal organs. Death occurs through either cardiovascular collapse or complete renal shutdown. There is no hospital on the island, no medical facility within range. The nearest antivenin is over an hour away by helicopter, assuming immediate evacuation. Historical records document the last permanent inhabitants of the island, a lighthouse keeper and his family, stationed there in the early 1920s. According to local accounts, the family was found dead inside the lighthouse. The official report stated they attempted to flee when snakes entered the structure through the windows. They made it as far as the edge of the forest before collapsing. Their bodies were discovered days later. The lighthouse was automated shortly after. No one has lived on the island since. In 2015, a team of herpetologists was granted access to conduct a population survey. On the third day, one researcher felt a sudden sharp pain in his boot. A juvenile viper had bitten through the reinforced leather. The expedition was immediately terminated. The researcher survived only because the helicopter was already on standby. He spent 11 days in intensive care. The golden lancehead is now critically endangered, threatened by inbreeding and habitat loss. Conservation efforts are ongoing, but they require human presence on the island, which remains nearly impossible to sustain. The snakes are territorial, aggressive when disturbed, and invisible until the moment they strike. Some are less than a foot long. Others exceed 3 feet. All are lethal. The Brazilian government maintains a permanent exclusion order. The island is monitored but not patrolled, and it will remain that way, because on Snake Island, survival is not a possibility. It is a miscalculation. The murder capital. Ciudad Juárez sits directly across the Rio Grande from El Paso, Texas, separated by a river and an international border. For decades, it served as a critical corridor for drug trafficking between South America and the United States. In the mid-2000s, that corridor became a battlefield. 2 rival cartels, the Sinaloa and Juárez organizations, went to war over control of the smuggling routes. The Mexican government deployed military forces in response. The city collapsed into violence that exceeded the death tolls of active war zones, and for years, it was the most dangerous city on Earth. In 2010, Ciudad Juárez recorded 3,622 homicides. The population at the time was approximately 1.3 million. That translates to a murder rate of 272 per 100,000 residents, higher than Baghdad during the height of the Iraq War. Bodies appeared daily in the streets, dumped in public as warnings. Victims were found decapitated, dismembered, or suspended from bridges. Messages were carved into flesh or written on cardboard signs left beside corpses. The violence was not random. It was systematic, theatrical, and designed to instill terror. Journalists became targets. Between 2006 and 2012, at least 12 reporters covering cartel activity in Juárez were murdered. Others disappeared and were never found. Newspapers stopped printing names. Articles about cartel violence were published anonymously or not at all. Photographers refused assignments in certain neighborhoods. One local editor received a severed hand with a note warning him to stop coverage. He fled the city. Many others followed. The Committee to Protect Journalists classified Ciudad Juárez as one of the deadliest places in the world for media workers, comparable only to active conflict zones in the Middle East. Kidnappings became routine. Businessmen, doctors, teachers, and even school children were taken for ransom. In many cases, families paid, and the victims were still killed. Extortion rackets targeted small businesses. Owners were given a simple choice: pay a weekly fee or be murdered. Many closed their shops and left. Entire commercial districts emptied. By 2011, over 10,000 businesses had shut down. An estimated 230,000 people fled the city, abandoning homes, properties, and livelihoods. Police corruption was not an allegation. It was a documented reality. Officers were on cartel payroll. Evidence disappeared. Investigations stalled. Witnesses were intimidated or killed before they could testify. In 2008, the federal government dismissed the entire Juarez municipal police force, over 2,000 officers, citing widespread infiltration by organized crime. The military assumed control of law enforcement. It made little difference. Soldiers were bribed, threatened, or simply outgunned. Cartel operatives moved openly, equipped with assault rifles, grenades, and armored vehicles. Firefights erupted in residential areas. Civilians were caught in crossfire while commuting, shopping, or walking their children to school. In February 2010, gunmen entered a house party in the Villas de Salvarcar neighborhood and opened fire. 15 people were killed, most of them teenagers. The attackers later claimed they had targeted the wrong address. No arrests were made. The incident became symbolic of the indiscriminate nature of the violence. There were no safe zones, no neutral parties. Everyone was a potential target or collateral damage. The violence began to decline after 2012, following shifts in cartel leadership and intensified federal military presence. By 2020, the homicide rate had dropped to approximately 85 per 100,000, still among the highest in the world, but a significant reduction. Yet the city remains volatile. Kidnappings persist. Extortion continues. In 2023, journalists reported renewed clashes between factions vying for control of smuggling operations. Travel advisories from the U.S. State Department classify Ciudad Juárez as a Level 3 risk. Reconsider travel. The violence is no longer at its peak, but the infrastructure of terror remains intact, and the disappeared have never been accounted for. The Forbidden Island. Approximately 50 kilometers west of the Andaman Islands lies a landmass roughly the size of Manhattan. It appears on maps as North Sentinel Island, a small forested territory surrounded by coral reefs and shallow waters. No accurate census has ever been conducted. No anthropological study has been completed. No treaty has been signed. The island remains one of the last places on Earth where modern civilization has no presence, no influence, and no access. The Sentinelese people have inhabited this island for an estimated 60,000 years, predating recorded history by tens of thousands of years. They are believed to be direct descendants of the first humans to migrate out of Africa. Their language is unknown. Their customs are undocumented. Their population is estimated between 50 and 500 individuals, but this is speculation. What is certain is their response to outsiders, immediate and absolute hostility. In 1974, a National Geographic film crew approached the island by boat. They were met with a volley of arrows. The director was struck in the thigh. The crew retreated. In 1991, Indian authorities attempted contact during a goodwill mission, bringing coconuts and metal tools as gifts. The Sentinelese accepted the offerings, then gestured for the visitors to leave. When a second visit was attempted weeks later, they were driven back with spears and stones. On November 15, 2018, American missionary John Allen Chau paid local fishermen to transport him near the island. He carried a waterproof Bible, fishhooks, and a football as gifts. He made landfall alone. The fishermen waited offshore. Hours later, they observed the Sentinelese dragging a body across the beach. Chau's remains were never recovered. The Indian government did not attempt retrieval. They explained that any incursion would provoke further violence and potentially introduce pathogens that could annihilate the tribe. The Sentinelese have no immunity to common diseases. A single case of influenza, measles, or even the common cold could spread through their population unchecked. Historical contact with isolated tribes in the Andaman chain resulted in mortality rates exceeding 90% within months. In 1880, a British expedition abducted 6 Sentinelese individuals. 2 children and 4 adults were taken to Port Blair. The adults died within weeks. The children were returned, likely carrying diseases back to the island. No records indicate what followed, but subsequent contact attempts were met with increased aggression. The Indian government declared North Sentinel Island and its surrounding waters a prohibited zone in 1956. The exclusion radius was later expanded to 3 nautical miles. Violators face arrest and imprisonment. The Indian Coast Guard patrols the perimeter but does not land. Overflight is restricted. Satellite imaging is the only method of observation permitted, and even that is limited. In 2004, after the Indian Ocean tsunami, a helicopter was dispatched to assess the island for casualties. As it descended, a lone figure emerged from the trees and fired arrows at the aircraft. The crew observed no visible damage to the forest or the settlement. The Sentinelese had survived. The helicopter did not return. The island remains under their control, defended not by law, but by force. And the message is unambiguous. There is no welcome. There is no negotiation. There is only the boundary and the certainty of what happens when it is crossed. The Death Lake. In northern Tanzania, near the border with Kenya, there exists a body of water that does not support life. Lake Natron stretches 57 kilometers in length and up to 22 kilometers in width, fed by mineral-rich hot springs and volcanic runoff from the Great Rift Valley. The water is not blue. It is red, sometimes deep crimson, stained by cyanobacteria that thrive in extreme alkalinity. The surface shimmers in the heat, reflecting a landscape that appears more Martian than terrestrial, and nothing that enters it leaves unchanged. The lake's pH level ranges between 9 and 10.5, nearing the alkalinity of pure ammonia. This is caused by high concentrations of sodium carbonate and other volcanic minerals that leach into the water from surrounding geological formations. The chemical composition is so caustic that direct contact with human skin causes severe burns within minutes. Eyes exposed to splashes suffer immediate damage. Corneal tissue blisters and clouds. In severe cases, permanent blindness follows. There are no medical facilities within 100 kilometers. No emergency response. No clean water to flush the wounds. Temperatures at the lake's edge frequently exceed 60 degrees Celsius, or 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat radiates upward from the salt flats and reflects off the water's surface, creating convection currents that distort vision. Dehydration occurs within an hour. Heat stroke follows shortly after. The body's cooling mechanisms fail in such conditions. Sweat evaporates instantly, providing no relief. Core temperature rises unchecked. Confusion sets in first, then loss of motor control, then unconsciousness. Without immediate intervention, death occurs within hours. Beneath the surface, the lake emits hydrogen sulfide gas. This is the same compound responsible for the smell of rotting eggs, but at Lake Natron, concentrations are far higher. Inhalation causes immediate respiratory distress. The gas binds to hemoglobin more effectively than oxygen, starving tissues of air even while breathing continues. Prolonged exposure leads to pulmonary edema, where the lungs fill with fluid. Victims drown from the inside. The gas is heavier than air, pooling in low-lying areas near the shore, invisible and odorless in lethal doses. The lake is known for something else. In 2013, photographer Nick Brandt documented a phenomenon that had been observed for decades but rarely recorded. Along the shoreline, he found the calcified remains of birds and bats, preserved in near-perfect condition. The animals had crashed into the lake's reflective surface, mistaking it for open sky. Upon contact, the alkaline water began chemically reacting with their bodies. The sodium carbonate encased them, hardening into a mineral shell. They did not decompose. They calcified, standing upright in grotesque poses, frozen mid-flight or mid-step, as if turned to stone. The process is a form of natural mummification. Soft tissues are destroyed, but the mineral crust preserves the shape and structure. The remains can last for years, statues of death scattered along the salt flats. Local populations avoid the lake. There are no fishing villages, no settlements within sight of the water. The Maasai people, who live in the surrounding region, refer to it as a cursed place. Flamingos are the only creatures that thrive here. Lesser flamingos breed on the lake's islands, protected by the very toxicity that kills everything else. Their legs are coated in a thick layer of scales that resist chemical burns, but even they remain in constant motion, never lingering too long in one place. Because Lake Natron does not forgive hesitation. It calcifies it. The furnace floor. In the northeastern corner of Ethiopia, near the borders of Eritrea and Djibouti, the Earth's crust has collapsed. The Danakil Depression sits 125 meters below sea level, one of the lowest and hottest places on the planet. It is not a desert. It is a volcanic wasteland, a thermal anomaly where three tectonic plates are slowly tearing the continent apart. The landscape is alien, neon yellow sulfur fields, pools of acid, crusts of salt stretching to the horizon, and temperatures that make human survival a matter of hours, not days. Daily temperatures in the Danakil Depression regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius or 122 degrees Fahrenheit. During summer months, readings have surpassed 60 degrees. The air is dry, oppressive, and thick with mineral dust. There is no shade, no vegetation, no natural water source fit for consumption. The few pools that exist are scalding, acidic, or both. Dehydration begins within 30 minutes of exposure. The body loses moisture faster than it can be replenished. Sweat evaporates before it reaches the skin's surface. Core temperature climbs steadily. Organ failure follows heat stroke within hours if untreated. Beneath the surface, magma sits less than a kilometer deep. The Danakil Depression is positioned directly above the Afar Triple Junction, where the African, Arabian, and Somali tectonic plates converge. This makes the region one of the most geologically active zones on Earth. The ground shifts constantly. Fissures open without warning. In 2005, a volcanic eruption split the desert floor along a 60-kilometer fracture, releasing clouds of ash and gas that blanketed the region for days. Earthquakes occur weekly. Some are minor tremors. Others collapse salt mines and alter the terrain overnight. The depression is dotted with active volcanoes. Ertaal, one of only 6 lava lakes in the world, sits at the northern edge. Its crater glows day and night, spilling molten rock across the basin. The lava is over 1100 degrees Celsius. Contact is instantaneous death. But the greater threat is not the lava. It is what rises from the volcanic vents and sulfur springs scattered throughout the region. Sulfur dioxide and chlorine gas are released continuously from cracks in the ground. These gases are heavier than air and settle in low-lying areas, pooling in invisible clouds. Sulfur dioxide causes immediate irritation to the eyes, throat, and lungs. Prolonged inhalation leads to pulmonary edema and respiratory failure. Chlorine is worse. It reacts with moisture in the lungs to form hydrochloric acid. Victims drown as their own respiratory system destroys itself from the inside. Both gases are colorless at lethal concentrations. The only warning is a faint acrid smell, often mistaken for natural volcanic odor. In 2012, a group of European tourists ventured into the depression with local guides. On the second day, 2 members of the party collapsed near a sulfur field. They were evacuated by helicopter, but one died en route to the hospital. The cause was listed as acute respiratory distress combined with severe heat stroke. The expedition was suspended. No formal investigation followed. There is no permanent settlement in the Danakil Depression. The Afar people, a nomadic group, occasionally cross the region to mine salt, but they move quickly and never remain overnight. They carry their own water, travel in the early morning before peak heat, and avoid the gas vents entirely. They have learned what the land teaches. This is not a place to linger. Rescue operations in the depression are nearly impossible. Mobile networks do not function. Satellite phones are unreliable due to atmospheric interference. Helicopter evacuations depend on weather, and dust storms can ground aircraft for days. Medical facilities are over 100 kilometers away, accessible only by unpaved roads that flood during rare rains. If something goes wrong in the Danakil Depression, Survival depends entirely on self-extraction, and the environment does not allow second chances. The Valley of Extremes. In the Mojave Desert of eastern California lies a basin 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America. Death Valley stretches 130 miles in length and up to 11 miles wide, flanked by mountain ranges that trap heat like the walls of a kiln. On July 10, 1913, a weather station at Furnace Creek recorded a temperature of 134 degrees Fahrenheit, or 56.7 degrees Celsius. It remains the highest reliably recorded air temperature on Earth. And while that record stands as history, the threat it represents is present every summer. From June through September, daily temperatures in Death Valley routinely exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground temperature can reach 200 degrees. Exposed metal becomes untouchable. Rubber softens and deforms. Vehicle tires have been documented melting onto asphalt within hours. Engines overheat and seize. Radiators boil dry. Breakdowns are common, and when they occur, the nearest service station may be over 50 miles away. Cell phone coverage is non-existent across most of the valley. Satellite phones are recommended, but not guaranteed to function due to topography and atmospheric interference. Dehydration in Death Valley is not gradual. The human body loses moisture through respiration, perspiration, and urination at an accelerated rate in extreme heat. At 120 degrees, a person can lose up to 2 liters of water per hour through sweat alone. Symptoms begin within 30 minutes: dizziness, dry mouth, confusion. Within 2 hours, motor control deteriorates. Cognitive function declines. Heat stroke follows rapidly. Core body temperature rises beyond the threshold where cellular proteins begin to break down. Organ systems fail in sequence. Without immediate cooling and intravenous fluids, death occurs within hours. In July 1996, a German tourist was found dead near the Badwater Basin salt flats. His vehicle had broken down. He had attempted to walk to the nearest road, a distance of approximately 4 miles. He made it less than 1. His water bottle was empty. The autopsy confirmed hyperthermia and severe dehydration. His core temperature at the time of death was estimated at 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Park rangers emphasize a single rule: stay with your vehicle. It provides shade, visibility, and a reference point for rescue. Attempting to walk out is suicide. Despite being one of the driest places on Earth, with an average annual rainfall of less than 2 inches, Death Valley is subject to sudden and catastrophic flooding. The valley floor is composed of fine silt and hardpan clay, which does not absorb water. When rain falls, it has nowhere to go. In August 2004, a storm dropped over 2 inches of rain in less than 3 hours near Zabriskie Point. The resulting flash flood swept through Furnace Creek, destroying roads, burying vehicles, and trapping dozens of tourists. 2 people died. The water arrived with no warning, transforming dry washes into raging torrents within minutes. Flash floods in desert environments are particularly deadly because they occur in areas where water is never expected. Drivers cross what appears to be a dry riverbed, unaware that a storm 20 miles upstream has already sent a wall of water down the channel. The current is powerful enough to flip vehicles and carry them hundreds of yards. Visibility during these events is near zero due to suspended sediment. Survivors report the water arriving as a brown wave, thick with debris, moving faster than they could react. In October 2015, a rare tropical storm reached Death Valley, triggering floods that closed the park for weeks. Roads were washed out, bridges collapsed, entire sections of pavement were undermined and swept away. The Park Service recorded over 3 inches of rain in a single day, more than the valley typically receives in 2 years. Visitors were evacuated by helicopter. Some were stranded for 48 hours. Death Valley is managed by the National Park Service. It is open to the public. But access does not mean safety. The Park Service distributes warnings, requires permits for backcountry travel, and advises visitors to carry at least 1 gallon of water per person per hour during summer. Yet every year, rescues are conducted, and every few years, someone does not make it out. The Silent Zone. On March 11, 2011, at 2:46 p.m. local time, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan. The tremor lasted 6 minutes. 41 minutes later, a tsunami reached the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The wave was 14 meters high. It breached the seawall, flooded the facility, and disabled the backup generators. Without power, the cooling systems failed. 3 reactors went into meltdown within 72 hours. Radioactive material was released into the air, the soil, and the Pacific Ocean. Within days, the Japanese government evacuated 160,000 people from a 20-kilometer radius. Most have never returned. The Fukushima Exclusion Zone remains in effect today. Radiation levels vary across the area, but certain sectors register readings that exceed 10 microsieverts per hour, well above safe exposure limits. Inside the plant itself, contamination is far worse. In 2017, a remote probe measured radiation levels of 530 sieverts per hour inside the Unit 2 containment vessel. At that intensity, a human would die within 2 minutes. Cellular structures collapse, deaden to shreds. The immune system ceases to function. Death is not from organ failure, but from the complete disintegration of biological processes. Radiation does not decay quickly. Cesium-137, one of the primary isotopes released during the meltdown, has a half-life of 30 years. Strontium-90 persists for 29 years. Plutonium-239 remains hazardous for 24,000 years. These materials have settled into the soil, absorbed into groundwater, and embedded themselves in buildings, roads, and forests. Cleanup efforts have been ongoing for over a decade, but progress is measured in fractions. Contaminated topsoil is scraped away and stored in massive black bags that now cover hundreds of acres. The bags are not permanent solutions. They degrade, and the material inside remains radioactive. In 2015, engineers deployed a remote-controlled robot into the damaged reactor to assess the extent of the core meltdown. The machine was designed to withstand extreme radiation and operate in environments too hostile for humans. It lasted 2 hours. The electronics failed due to radiation-induced degradation. A second robot was sent in 2017. It captured a single photograph before its circuits fried. The image revealed a hole in the reactor floor and melted nuclear fuel forming stalactites of corium, similar to what was found at Chernobyl. The fuel has melted through the containment structure and lies somewhere beneath the reactor, unreachable and unmeasurable. The exclusion zone is not entirely abandoned. Decontamination teams work in shifts, wearing full protective gear and dosimeters that track cumulative exposure. Workers are rotated out after reaching legally mandated limits, often within weeks. Some areas have been declared safe enough for limited daytime access, but nighttime habitation is prohibited. Shops, schools, and homes sit empty, frozen in time. Calendars hang on walls, still displaying March 2011. Personal belongings remain where they were left. In certain districts, wild boar and other animals have moved in, thriving in the absence of human activity. But they, too, are contaminated. Tissue samples from these animals show elevated levels of cesium and strontium. They cannot be consumed. They cannot be relocated. They exist as a secondary warning of what lingers in the environment. In 2021, the Japanese government announced plans to gradually reopen sections of the exclusion zone. Radiation levels in some areas have dropped below 20 millisieverts per year, the threshold for permanent resettlement. But surveys show that fewer than 15% of former residents intend to return. The reason is not only radiological, it is psychological. Trust in safety assurances has eroded, and the question remains unanswered: what lies beneath the reactors, and how do you remove something you cannot touch, measure, or see? The answer, for now, is you do not. You wait, and the zone remains silent. The empty quarter. The Sahara Desert spans 9 million square kilometers across North Africa, roughly the size of the United States. It is the largest hot desert on Earth, stretching from the Atlantic coast to the Red Sea. Temperatures during the day exceed 50 degrees Celsius in summer months. At night, they plummet to near freezing. There are no rivers, no reliable vegetation, no landmarks that persist. The terrain is a sea of sand dunes, gravel plains, and rocky plateaus that shift with the wind. And those who enter unprepared do not return. Navigation in the Sahara is not simply difficult, it is disorienting. Sand dunes can rise over 180 meters high, blocking sightlines and creating identical horizons in every direction. Wind erases tracks within hours. GPS systems function, but they require waypoints, and waypoints require prior knowledge of the terrain. Without that, coordinates become meaningless. In 2020, a convoy of aid workers traveling between Niger and Algeria became lost after their lead vehicle's GPS malfunctioned. They were found 3 days later, 40 kilometers off course, nearly out of fuel and water. One member had already begun showing signs of severe dehydration. Water is the absolute limiting factor. The human body loses moisture rapidly in extreme heat, up to 1 liter per hour through perspiration alone. Without replacement, dehydration begins within 2 hours. The first symptoms are thirst, dizziness, and a dry mouth. Within 6 hours, cognitive function declines. Muscle coordination deteriorates. By 12 hours, the body enters hypovolemic shock. Blood pressure drops. Organs shut down. Death follows within 24 hours if no water is consumed. In the Sahara, there are no natural water sources across vast stretches. Wells exist, but they are separated by hundreds of kilometers. Missing one means death. The desert is also subject to violent atmospheric events. Sandstorms, known locally as haboobs, form when strong winds lift millions of tons of fine sand and dust into the air, creating walls of particulate matter that advance at speeds exceeding 60 kilometers per hour. These storms can reach altitudes of over 3,000 meters and stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Visibility drops to zero within seconds. The air becomes unbreathable. Fine particles penetrate clothing, eyes, and respiratory passages. Inhalation causes choking, coughing, and in severe cases, suffocation as the lungs fill with dust. In March 2022, a massive sandstorm swept across southern Algeria and northern Mali, lasting for over 48 hours. Satellites recorded the plume extending across 1,500 kilometers. Communication networks failed. Roads became impassable. Search and rescue operations were suspended. When the storm cleared, authorities discovered multiple vehicles buried under drifts of sand. Occupants had suffocated, unable to exit their cars as sand poured through air vents and window seals. The death toll was never officially confirmed, but estimates placed it in the dozens. The Sahara is not uninhabited. Nomadic groups such as the Tuareg and Berber have traversed it for centuries, using ancient knowledge of star navigation, seasonal water sources, and weather patterns. But even they avoid travel during peak summer and remain constantly vigilant for signs of approaching storms. Their survival depends on preparation, not luck. Modern travelers, equipped with vehicles and technology, often underestimate the environment. Fuel runs out. Engines overheat. Tires puncture on sharp rocks hidden beneath the sand. When a vehicle breaks down, the occupants face a choice: stay and wait for rescue that may never come, or walk in search of help that may not exist. In 2019, a French tourist traveling solo became stranded after his motorcycle broke down near the Algerian-Libyan border. He activated his emergency beacon, but sandstorms delayed the helicopter response for 3 days. By the time rescuers reached him, he was unconscious, severely dehydrated, and suffering from second-degree burns across exposed skin. He survived, but only because his beacon functioned and the storm eventually cleared. Most are not so fortunate. The Sahara does not negotiate. It does not provide second chances, and it does not forgive miscalculation. The passage of death. Between the southern tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula lies a body of water 800 kilometers wide. The Drake Passage connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, But it is not merely a corridor. It is a convergence zone where three of the world's most powerful ocean currents collide: the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the Cape Horn Current, and the Falkland Current. These waters are unrestricted by landmass, allowing storms to build momentum across thousands of miles of open ocean. The result is some of the most violent sea conditions anywhere on the planet. And for centuries, sailors have called it the most dangerous crossing in the world. Wave heights in the Drake Passage regularly exceed 12 meters. During severe storms, they have been recorded at over 20 meters, equivalent to a 6-story building. These are not predictable swells. They arrive in chaotic patterns, generated by competing currents and wind systems that shift without warning. Ships are struck from multiple directions simultaneously. Hulls are battered. Cargo shifts. Crews are thrown across decks. In 1998, a research vessel traveling to Antarctica reported a rogue wave measuring 29 meters from trough to crest. The ship survived, but the impact buckled steel plating and shattered reinforced windows on the bridge. Wind speeds in the passage are equally extreme. Gale force winds, classified as sustained speeds above 63 kilometers per hour, are common. During winter months, winds can exceed 160 kilometers per hour, reaching hurricane strength. These winds generate surface currents that push against underlying ocean flows, creating standing waves and turbulence that destabilize even large vessels. In 2010, a cruise ship with over 150 passengers aboard was caught in a storm while crossing the Drake Passage. Winds reached 140 kilometers per hour. The ship lost propulsion and drifted for 6 hours before engines could be restarted. Passengers reported furniture sliding across cabins, dishes shattering, and injuries from falls. One crew member suffered a fractured skull. Emergency evacuation was impossible. The nearest coast was 400 kilometers away. Water temperature in the Drake Passage averages between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius. Falling overboard in these conditions is a death sentence. Hypothermia begins within minutes. At 2 degrees, the body's core temperature drops rapidly. Muscle control deteriorates. Swimming becomes impossible. Consciousness fades within 15 to 30 minutes. Death follows shortly after. In 2017, a sailor was swept overboard during a squall. The crew initiated search protocols immediately, but visibility was near zero due to spray and rain. The water was too rough to deploy rescue boats. The search was called off after 2 hours. The body was never recovered. Rescue operations in the Drake Passage are nearly impossible during active storms. Helicopters cannot fly in high winds. Ships cannot maneuver safely in chaotic seas. Satellite communication is intermittent due to the region's proximity to the magnetic pole, which disrupts signal transmission. Coast Guard stations are located in southern Chile and Argentina, but response times exceed 12 hours under optimal conditions. During storms, response is delayed indefinitely. Survivors must rely entirely on their own vessel's ability to weather the conditions. If the ship is compromised, there is no backup. The passage was first navigated in 1616 by Dutch explorer Willem Schouten, who lost one of his 2 ships to the seas. For the next 3 centuries, it remained the only route between the Atlantic and Pacific before the construction of the Panama Canal in 1914. Thousands of ships attempted the crossing. Hundreds were lost. Wreckage litters the seafloor, preserved in cold, oxygen-poor water. Even today, with modern navigation, reinforced hulls, and satellite weather tracking, the Drake Passage remains unpredictable. In 2019, a cargo vessel reported being struck by 3 rogue waves in succession, each over 15 meters high. The ship sustained structural damage but remained afloat. The crew described the experience as being inside a washing machine, with no control and no visibility. Scientists and researchers cross the Drake Passage regularly to reach Antarctic research stations. They plan voyages around weather windows, carry emergency supplies, and prepare for the worst. But preparation does not guarantee safety. The passage does not respect schedules, and it does not offer reprieve. It is a body of water governed entirely by force, where the ocean and atmosphere meet without restraint, and those who enter it do so knowing that survival is not guaranteed. It is negotiated, wave by wave.